granularity of SDG data. We will start in a moment. I'm just watching the numbers rapidly increase of attendees as they join us. And when that number stops rising, then we will open the session in just one moment. Okay, very warm welcome to all of you to this session on Data4Now, working to improve the timeliness and granularity of SDG data. My name is Claire Melamed and I'm the CEO of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, one of the 4 core partners in this initiative, alongside the UN Statistics Division, the World Bank, and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And on behalf of all 4 of the core partners, a very warm welcome to this session. We're going to be reviewing some of the progress that's been made by the initiative since the launch in September 2019 at the General Assembly that year, which seems like a slightly different world to the one that we now inhabit. But I think that despite the many changes that we've seen since then, the basic need for Data4Now has not gone away. And if anything, the urgency of the pandemic response has only brought home the absolute the fact that timely data that can provide policymakers with an accurate picture of the world as it is today is absolutely essential for good decision making in times of crisis, in times of change, and as governments are trying to get the basic public services and meet the expectations of their people. Timely data is absolutely essential, has always been, but it's now more possible than ever before, thanks to improvements in technology and to the very hard work done by many statisticians over the years on the development of methodologies to take account to enable those new technologies to produce robust and reliable statistics. So the Data4Now initiative really exists to spread the possibilities of timely data as far and as wide as possible by working closely with statistics offices and with those who have products, have services, and have the expertise that can help to spread the use of the new technologies to produce timely and reliable data, and help statisticians to serve their societies and their governments by providing the insights and the information that can ultimately deliver better policies and better lives. It was launched, as I say, in September 2019 at an event at the UN General Assembly, launched by our dear friend and colleague, the UN Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed. And we're very pleased today to hear presentations from many of the pioneer countries with whom we've been working since that date to really understand their needs, their priorities, and how Data4Now can best serve their needs as they try to be good stewards and custodians of data to serve their people and their governments. So we're going to be hearing from them. I won't trespass on your time too much longer. Before we start, a few housekeeping notes. The event will be conducted mainly in English, but for those, we will have some presentations in French and in Spanish. And for those who would prefer to listen in English all the way through, on the bottom of your screen, there should be the bottom right-hand side of the screen. There should be a small globe symbol. If you press on that, you will find the translation channel, and you can press on on English, and we'll have translation. Thanks very much to those of my colleagues stepping in to provide it, so that you will be able to hear in English throughout. We are recording the session, and it's also being streamed live on YouTube at this very moment. And the recording will be made available after the event. So with that, we have a lot to get through, and we are very, very happy to introduce first representatives who will speak to the experience of Senegal, one of the early adopters of Data4Now, a country that's been at the forefront of many of the developments in data across Africa and beyond. We have a number of different speakers. I will introduce them all now, and then they will pass the baton from one to another. First, you'll hear from Mr. Ale Diop, who is the Director General of UNSD, the Senegalese National Statistics Office. Warm welcome to you, sir. He'll be followed by my colleague, Mr. Francois Camano, who's the Program Manager at the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, Dr. Ibrahima Campo, who leads for SDSN TReNDS in Senegal, and finally from Ms. Farial Ahmed, who will be speaking on behalf of the UN Statistics Division. So a very interesting presentation, multifaceted presentation that we're about to hear on the experience of Senegal. But let me first warmly welcome Mr. Diop. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. My presentation is in French because I'm fluent in French. My English is a little. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup de m'avoir donné la parole pour présenter les bénéfices de Data4Now pour le Sénégal. Ma présentation va s'articuler autour de l'appui technique de l'initiative des données urbaines pour la gestion durable des terres, le forum virtuel international sur les objectifs du développement durable et enfin les perspectives. Pour ce qui concerne l'appui technique, l'utilisation du African Regional Data Cube avec l'appui technique du partenariat mondial sur les données du développement durable a permis au groupe technique pour le suivi des ODD liés à l'environnement de renforcer ses capacités sur cet outil et de disposer de données désagrégées à partir d'études de cas menés sur 8 indicateurs sur les 32 qui devaient être suivis. L'utilisation de cet outil GTPod a permis d'avoir des données désagrégées, environ 9,3% des indicateurs du secteur de l'environnement et du développement durable.
Mr. Diop,
oui.
let me apologize profusely. We seem to have a problem with the translation, and there are many people who will be wanting to hear you in English. I don't want them to miss what you're saying. So Alan and Francois, could we please ask you to very urgently sort out the translation before we ask Mr. Diop to proceed? It's not fair if he speaks and people can't understand him.
Okay.
Alan, can you let us know what's happening?
Just a moment, trying to sort that.
Yes, now it is. Now I can hear you, Francois. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And my deepest apologies, Mr. Diop, for interrupting you, but please do start again.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, merci beaucoup de nous avoir invités pour la présentation des bénéfices du projet Data4Now pour le Sénégal. Je disais que mon intervention va s'articuler autour de l'appui technique. Quels sont les bénéfices liés à l'appui technique de Data4Now? Également sur l'initiative des données urbaines, notamment la gestion durable des terres, mais également sur le forum virtuel international sur les objectifs du développement durable, et enfin les perspectives, n'est-ce pas, par rapport à ce projet. Donc, en ce qui concerne l'appui technique, l'utilisation du African Regional Data Cube avec l'appui technique du partenariat mondial sur les données du développement durable a permis au groupe technique pour le suivi des ODD liés à l'environnement de renforcer les capacités sur cet outil et de disposer de données désagrégées à partir d'études de cas menées sur 8 indicateurs parmi les 32. Également, l'utilisation de cet outil a permis au GTPod d'avoir des données désagrégées, environ 9,3% des indicateurs du secteur de l'environnement et du développement durable. Le rapport de capitalisation a été produit et validé au cours d'un atelier tenu au mois de mars 2020, avec au total 78 participants provenant des structures représentées au sein de la plateforme nationale des acteurs qui suivent les ODD. En ce qui concerne l'initiative des données urbaines, après la réunion de Kigali, le SDSN Sahel, en partenariat avec l'Agence nationale de la statistique et de la démographie du Sénégal, le GPSDD et l'IPAR, l'initiative prospective agricole, ont organisé une série de webinaires sur la problématique des données du cadastre au Sénégal, c'est-à-dire sur le foncier, sur la cartographie du cadastre en général qui pose un certain nombre de problèmes au Sénégal et qui a plusieurs acteurs. Cela a permis de comprendre le contexte actuel des données du cadastre. Et cela également a permis de mettre en place un comité de recherche qui a réalisé l'inventaire des données et outils dans le secteur cadastral au Sénégal, avec l'implication également des acteurs. Ce rapport a également proposé une feuille de route pour le renforcement de l'écosystème cadastral en République du Sénégal. Mais également un forum international sur les objectifs de développement durable également a été organisé virtuellement. Ce forum sur la contribution des solutions africaines dans la mise en œuvre post-Covid des objectifs de développement durable a été tenu le 16 et 18 décembre 2020 en ligne. Donc, ce forum des solutions globales a permis aux experts en sciences, en technologie et en politique publique afin de partager les progrès, de mettre en lumière les victoires locales et de s'inspirer mutuellement pour continuer à avancer dans cette situation de pandémie. Les présentations ont porté sur des solutions locales tout en prenant en compte le contexte Covid et l'intégration de la technologie. Cela a permis au Sénégal d'apprendre du Mali, du Togo et de la Guinée sur les thématiques au niveau régional comme l'immigration ou encore l'utilisation des données administratives. Comme perspective liée aux activités également à mener et sur les différentes actions également à mener dans le futur, donc en collaboration avec la division des statistiques des Nations Unies et le soutien financier du gouvernement italien, il s'agira de contribuer à réduire le gap des indicateurs ODD non renseignés dans les domaines suivants. Dans le domaine de la sécurité alimentaire, il s'agit d'estimer des indicateurs liés à la sécurité alimentaire en mettant à profit les données micro-collectées dans l'enquête sur les conditions harmonisées sur les conditions de vie des ménages. Ceci se fera grâce à une extraction d'une sous-base de ménages agricoles. En deuxième perspective, il s'agira d'utiliser de l'utilisation des terres et données urbaines. Il s'agira de mettre à profit les projections démographiques de l'Agence nationale de la statistique et de la démographie, mais aussi les données de l'enquête démographique et de santé, EDS, pour estimer certains indicateurs non enregistrés. En ce qui concerne la gestion durable des sols, des eaux et la forêt, l'Agence nationale de la statistique a prévu de tenir des rencontres avec le GTPod afin de voir comment estimer les 24 indicateurs restants sur les 32 qui concernent l'environnement. Pour les changements climatiques, il est prévu sur cette thématique de collaborer avec la direction de la protection civile afin d'estimer des indicateurs liés aux victimes de catastrophes naturelles. Pour ce qui est du Covid-19, Data4Now devrait appuyer le déploiement d'une plateforme centralisant toutes les données disponibles sur la Covid-19. Toutes ces activités se feront grâce à l'intégration des données micro, macro et des données administratives. 2 consultants sont déjà recrutés et travaillent en étroite collaboration avec l'UNSD, UNSD également, afin de permettre la mise en œuvre des objectifs le plus tôt possible. Il faut également ajouter que Data4Now a permis également de recruter un coordonnateur qui a permis véritablement de faciliter le lien entre les différents acteurs qui évoluent également dans le projet. Voilà, Madame, Messieurs, quelques éléments que j'aimerais citer sur les bénéfices que Data4Now a apportés au Sénégal. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Diop. That was fantastic, really fascinating, and I think speaks very much to the breadth, but also the depth of collaboration, the number of different areas that you've covered, but also the depth and the specificity. And I particularly like the point about regional learning and the way in which countries across the region are getting together to share their experiences with each other. Can we move on to the next speaker from this group, please? I think Mr. Francois, is that going to be you or Dr. Campo? Okay.
Hello. Hello.
Dr. Campo, can we hear you?
Yes. Yes. Do you hear me?
Very faintly, Dr. Campo. Perhaps if you can get a little bit closer to the microphone or speak very loudly.
Yes. And now?
Great. Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So I'm Dr. Campo from the SDSN Sahel network. And I think that Mr. Diop already presented a great part of my slide. It was about this report. So as he mentioned, SDSN Sahel bring together some experts who delivered a report on the data and tools in the cadastral sector in Senegal. So the content of this report was first the history of the evolution of the organization of states of cadastral. So we take the history since 1863 to our days. So and go to the independence, how these different institutions make new reform and laws about in the cadastral sector. So then we try to make an inventory of all the stakeholder and all the data available, all the tools and all the data available in the cadastral sector. But this inventory showed that the image of a cadastre and land conservation was tarnished by a persistence of certain number of constraints, in particular the obsolescence of land legislation, the manual nature of operating system, the lack of human, material, and financial resources in of state actors in these three areas. And beside this, we also try to make an inventory of existing tools and synergy action. And among these initiatives and tools identified that can contribute of the development of better synergy and land mapping and management, we can set the existence of at the level of National Agency Statistic, UNSD, some collaboration with other institutions and stakeholders. And also in this report, we also make map the commitment of a different actor and in the collection of cadastral data. So we can mention the DG ID, which is the Directory of Geologists, and the Directorate of Registration, Domain, and Stamp, the Directorate of Taxes and Investigation. So to try to make this framework between all these things, stakeholder of in this cadastral sector, and how we can grow this synergy to not reinvent the wheel. So, and like Mr. Drop also said, we also define a roadmap to strengthen this cadastral sector.
Thank you very much, Dr. Campo. Let me now invite my colleague, Mr. Francois Camano from the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, who will present, and then finally Farial Ahmed from UNSD. Francois, over to you. Yes, Francois, we can hear you. I can't see you. If you would like to turn your camera on, please do. But if bandwidth prevents it, that's fine.
C'est autre chose, il n'y a pas de truc.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francois. Apologies to those who had trouble with the audio in Francois's presentation. We are not doing so well with the technology today, which is slightly ironic for an initiative which is all about making technology more accessible, but there we are. I think that the challenge came because I think Francois was broadcasting on the English channel. So for those of you who will be listening for the next presentations, Farial will be speaking in English. For those of you who will be listening in Spanish during the Paraguay session, it would probably be easiest if you switch back to English, if you switch to English after that, to make absolutely sure that everybody can hear everything. And once again, my apologies. As I say, the video will be available and the presentations too, so you will be able to hear anything you've missed. But thank you very much, Francois. And thank you for acknowledging also all the fantastic other partners who've helped us so much with some of the data solutions and training and so on during this initiative in many of the countries where we've been active. And now over to you, Faria.
Thank you so much, Claire and Francois and Ibrahima. It's really good to see all the work that's coming along in Senegal. And we're just also happy that we have two consultants on board who are being led by the UNSD to push this work further in collaboration with whatever work has been done with other partners so far. So with the help of our project coordinator who is in Senegal right now and working with the senior stakeholders, the Data4Now project has identified these 5 thematic areas to work on, as mentioned by Mr. Diop as well. So these include the food security, land use and urban data, sustainable land and water management and forests, climate change, and COVID-19. So these are the process that went through to achieve, to come to these shortlisted indicators was that all the stakeholders were involved and the relevant ministries and focal persons from the relevant ministries were involved to identify these priority indicators and needs to estimate these indicators. So the approach that that these stakeholders have so far identified is that they want to focus on the indicators for which they haven't been estimated, but the existing data is available. So they need to come up with methodologies and the estimation methods in order to reach to these indicators. For example, one of the key indicators that was also highlighted was under COVID-19, which was pooling of available data on COVID-19. So the idea is the need is to establish this data portal, which would have collected data for COVID-19. So far, these indicators have been shortlisted in collaboration with UNSD and the relevant ministries. In the next phase, the NSS would be involved further, where the shortlisted indicators would be sent out to relevant stakeholders for endorsement before working on it further. In addition to this, to help establish a data architecture, a consultant, an IT consultant is also hired or is on board now, who will establish a data architecture in Senegal to support all of these activities under the Data4Now projects. One thing that I want to highlight is that, for example, if you look at the sustainable land and water management indicators, these indicators are still under consultation with the stakeholders, and the reason that we haven't put it out there is because there's still consultation with GPSDD that Mr. Diop also mentioned. So after that consultation that would take place this week, these indicators would be further finalized before they can be put out there for further work. Over to you, Claire. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Farial, and thanks to all. And I think those presentations together really get across the huge amount of progress and really very sort of detailed work that has gone on in Senegal. And my congratulations to the team at UNSD and SDSN and others for this work. I mean, it's worth saying, I think, that though there's a lot of separate pieces of this particular jigsaw, and it may look quite complicated, but all of this is speaking to a single set of priorities that were agreed that were put forward by Senegal in the initial planning stages of Data4Now. It's very much an initiative which has been driven by all of the countries that you will hear about today, and those others who are part of the Data4Now group. And obviously we are working in the different countries on many fronts, and in line with the priorities that those countries have set themselves. But I hope that presentation gets across the breadth of different work that can come under this single set of priorities that the countries have identified. So thank you very, very much to all of you for getting across something of the flavour of the work that's going on in Senegal. And now let us turn our attention to Paraguay, another country which has been at the forefront of seizing the opportunities presented by the Data4Now initiative. And let me compliment the Director General of the Statistics Office of Paraguay, Mr. Ojeda, for his leadership in this area. We're going to hear first from Ivan Ojeda, as I mentioned, the Director General of the National Statistics Office in Paraguay. And then we will hear from Mr. Freddy Rodriguez, who is the Data Coordinator at CEPE, a Colombia-based think tank, and leads our work on Data4Now across the Latin America region. But first of all, Ivan, the floor is yours.
Muy buenos días, un saludo cordial a esa gran familia de GPSDD en la persona de Claire. Estamos saludando desde el nuevo Instituto Nacional de Estadística del Paraguay. El año 2020 fue un año complejo, difícil debido a la pandemia, pero también un año histórico en donde el Paraguay jerarquiza la estadística instalando el Instituto Nacional de Estadísticas. Desde mayo del 2018, nuestra oficina de estadística es miembro de la Alianza Global de Datos para el Desarrollo Sostenible. En el marco de la alianza, hemos trabajado en diferentes frentes para fortalecer las capacidades estadísticas del país y dar cumplimiento a los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, los ODS. Entre otros, se encuentra nuestra participación en la iniciativa Data4Now, una iniciativa liderada por GPSDD, SDSN TReNDS, la División de Estadísticas de Naciones Unidas y el Banco Mundial. La siguiente, por favor. Que busca apoyar a las oficinas nacionales de estadística. Si podemos avanzar, Freddy, con la presentación. Gracias. En la reunión de Kigali en Ruanda se ha realizado la identificación y priorización de acciones, habiendo Paraguay seleccionado los proyectos del sistema de agua basado en datos y el uso de datos de movilidad humana para potenciar, entre otros, la respuesta inmediata a eventos de desastres e inundaciones en el Paraguay. La siguiente. Se ha desarrollado inicialmente una encuesta de diagnóstico sobre el uso de fuentes de datos no tradicionales en el Paraguay. Punto de partida para contar por primera vez con una evaluación sobre las fortalezas y debilidades del sector en materia de uso de datos no tradicionales y de esa forma visualizar las instituciones con las cuales desarrollar capacitación y fortalecer los esfuerzos en esta área. También hemos realizado un taller sobre la situación del sistema de información de agua del país, con la participación de los principales actores del sector. Una enriquecedora experiencia de acercamiento con todos los miembros de agua del país. Cabe tener presente que el Paraguay forma parte del acuífero Guaraní y comparte las represas hidroeléctricas más importantes de la región. Itaipú con el Brasil y Yacenetá con Argentina. La exploración de fuentes de datos no tradicionales se ha dado el inicio a través de las conversaciones con instituciones del Estado para explorar, mejor dicho, datos móviles como fuentes de información para alcanzar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Aquí cabe destacar el primer acercamiento del INE con las empresas telefónicas y el ente rector para evaluar las posibilidades de disponer de datos de las empresas telefónicas del Paraguay. Ha quedado planteada la opción de utilización de datos en el marco de la nueva ley estadística que da apertura potencial a este uso. Igualmente, hemos realizado talleres de intercambio de experiencias sobre sistemas de información de agua con la República Dominicana y México. Igualmente, hemos realizado un taller sobre gobernanza e indicadores hacia un sistema de información de agua en Paraguay. Las experiencias detalladas en los encuentros han brindado elementos para ubicar en la agenda de trabajo de las distintas instituciones de la relevancia de la gobernanza del sector agua. En junio a noviembre del año 2020 hemos realizado una consultoría nacional para potenciar la construcción de indicadores ODS vinculados al sector agua, evaluando la información sobre el estado actual del sistema de información del sector de agua. A partir de ese diagnóstico tenemos los siguientes productos. En primer lugar, el éxito de una gran convocatoria y movilización de los principales actores del sector de agua del país en el marco de la iniciativa Data4Now. Junto con el CPI, esto permitió evidenciar el estado de avances del sistema de información de aguas del Paraguay. Igualmente, el estudio destaca que el sistema de información única, el SIU, para el sector de agua potable y alcantarillado sanitario, administrado por el SAM, cuenta con una información de 3.300 operadores, del total de 4.600. Información que se actualiza con los informes de verificación técnica anuales realizados por los funcionarios de la institución que tienen baja cobertura respecto al total, generándose así una brecha importante de información. Y finalmente, disponer de la línea de base de los principales indicadores de agua del Paraguay, potenciando la medición de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, el número 6 en concreto en Paraguay. La siguiente, por favor. Los siguientes pasos a seguir tienen que ver, si podemos avanzar. Los siguientes pasos a seguir tienen que ver con desarrollar un plan de fortalecimiento de registros administrativos vinculados al sector de agua con el fin de potenciar la generación de información válida con fines estadísticos para el seguimiento de las políticas públicas y programas vinculados. Asimismo, fortalecer las capacidades técnicas y tecnológicas al interior de las instituciones con el fin de potenciar la generación de información mediante la utilización de imágenes satelitales y datos móviles. Asimismo, potenciar la gobernanza de los datos como punto clave para el seguimiento de planes y políticas públicas. Y finalmente, contar con una plataforma de datos sobre el sector agua para optimizar la generación, uso e implementación de acciones en esta materia de agua. Esta ha sido una breve presentación en lo que hemos hecho con Data4Now. Ahora quiero ceder el uso de palabra al colega Freddy Rodríguez del CPI, que también es un gran aliado para el Paraguay, conjuntamente siendo parte de la Alianza Global de Datos para el Desarrollo Sostenible. Muchas gracias. Adelante, Freddy.
Thank you, Ivan. I hope everyone can hear me. And just for the ones that are on the Spanish channel, please, if you can change to the English channel so that we miss the intervention. So just complementary to what Director Ivan Ojeda just mentioned is how we actually engage in Paraguay as a priority country in the two elements that Director Ojeda just mentioned. On the water information system, yes, on one side, bringing also and making more visible the importance of having this system for decision makers. So we have different sources in Paraguay that sometimes are not even available for the data to be consulted by these actors in order to make decisions based on data and evidence. So for that, actually, it's important that we have in mind partnerships. So for the partnerships, in the case of Paraguay, we were able in 2020 to engage with actors in Dominican Republic, in Mexico, based on the experiences that they had in building these kind of systems, this kind of water information systems that is not only talking about technical issues, but also on the governance issues, which actors are involved, who needs to be taking some responsibilities or roles within the system. That were the kind of discussions that we have in the workshops, bringing Dominican Republic, Mexico. Also, we brought FAO and UNEP just to explore the kind of systems and also other partnerships that can complement the discussions within Paraguayan colleagues as well, and to see what else we can include in the platform that Ivan just mentioned. And also in the partnerships, it's important that one of the essence of the Data4Now initiative is to bring partners into the discussion. So it's not starting from zero, but rather to listen to other partners that already have gone through these similar exercises. In the case of what we have learned in Paraguay is also, as I just mentioned, just partnerships is a process or a possibility to learn from others, but also the high-level engagement from authorities becomes an important element. So if we don't have this commitment from the high level, so we are able to commit with different stakeholders within the Paraguayan government, but also non-stakeholders from the government as well, such as academia, universities were involved, and some actors from the civil society. So to have the discussion about data, not only related to government demands, but also other demands that are required by other actors. And then it comes to the building trust element. So if we have that trust that the water information system is not only for one actor to provide data, but rather for the whole government, the whole system, and other actors that can take this data as the possibility to do research or to analyze what is happening in Paraguay. That was a key element that we discussed during 2020 in the in-person workshop. And then when we had the COVID impact in the region, we moved to more elements related to virtual discussions as well. And then it goes to the discussion as well about the data and methodologies. What kind of guidelines, methodologies are being implemented? So that's where we actually include the discussions about how Mexico is implementing these systems for several years of discussions and what lessons learned can be taken in the case of Paraguay. And just to finalize, what we actually have as an impact in Paraguay is, first of all, the capacity building to get this information system running. So we have some examples from Mexico, especially from FAO, about the water system that they already have, so that the idea is to start implementing some of those guidelines and methodologies as well. The identification and the limitation of strategies for the water information system. So it's important also to have the governance discussion within the system, who is going to be taking some roles, some responsibilities, and who is going to be leading the data component and also the decision-making component. And then finally, the baseline of the indicators for the water information system was one of the biggest achievements last year through the consultancy exercise that we have with several organizations within the government, but also other demands coming from outside the government. That document is ready and is the baseline for the water information system in Paraguay. So I finalize here. Thank you. And well, this is a picture that we took in 2019 when we started the first discussion in the kickoff workshop of Kigali. We wanted to bring this to your attention as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Freddie. Happy days in Kigali, where we got together and planned and prioritized all of this work that you've been hearing about. That was the first time that the Data4Now project got together, and it was extremely productive and quite fun, I seem to remember also. Thank you so much, Ivan and Freddie. Really helpful and really great, I think, to dig down into one sector and really understand the very concrete results which the Data4Now initiative will hopefully continue to bring, thanks to all of the fantastic work which is going on there, being led by Ivan and assisted so well by Freddie and the rest of the team. So thank you so much to all of you. And now for the rest of the session, let me do two things. Let me first of all encourage you all to make use of the chat function. We have a lot of speakers and we're going to have limited time for Q&A in person, but we're very keen to listen out for your comments in the chat. And let me now hand over to my friend and colleague Grant Cameron, the director of SDSN TReNDS, who's going to lead us in the next session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. As Claire mentioned, my name is Grant Cameron, and we're pivoting at this point in this side event. And we're doing a panel discussion. So I'm the moderator for this panel discussion. As Claire mentioned, I'm the director of a global research network that's housed in the Sustainable Development Solutions Network that looks in innovative approaches to improve data and statistics. And there aren't going to be any presentations for the next 20 minutes as we index through 4 great panelists. If you do have a question, I would encourage you to put it into the chat box. We'll see if we can squeeze it in during this session. If not, we'll reflect on it and see how we can pivot back to you. Right now, I think I'm just going to introduce our 4 panelists and then get right into it. Our first panelist is Ms. Karen Chavez, and she's the head of the SDG indicator unit in the National Statistical Office in Colombia. Our second panelist is Mr. Matava Batmunk, who's the chairman of the National Statistical Office in Mongolia. Our third panelist is not from a statistical office. He's from the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Italy, and he's the head of Sustainable Development Division. So we'll be interested to hear his views on more from a donor partner and developed country perspective. And then finally, we have Mr. Bod Chen, who is the director of the Center of International Earth Science Information Network, and the manager and leader of the data collaborative PopGrid, who's going to give us a little bit of a flavor of how that initiative is helping this Data4Now program. So now I'm going to turn back to Karen and ask her one question. Karen, so during the initial phase of this project, I think the Statistical Office in Colombia identified the need to improve poverty estimates, both in terms of their timeliness and as well in terms of the sort of the details underlying where the poor live and more aspects about the poor in Colombia. Can you share one or two examples of how you worked through this partnership to improve these estimates? And can you give us a sense of how important this was to the government officials in terms of their policy development? So over to you, Karen.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to start mentioning that from census data, for the first time, DANE calculated the multidimensional poverty index at municipality level. Even more, the MPI was calculated at per block level, and these results were published by October 2019. I precise here also that in Colombia, the average magnitude of a block is 6,400 square meters. that is the equivalent to something like 7,600 square yards. This means data available to characterize and describe living conditions and welfare of people with disaggregation levels smaller than a square kilometer, which I think that it's highly desirable data, since there is a high chance that with this data, not only national governments, but also local governments can identify and quantify differences in living standards, not only between cities and municipalities, but also within cities, which is key to leave no one behind and make visible vulnerable groups. After this first calculation, and from the inception workshop of the Data4Now initiative in Kigali in November of 2019, we started with all the partners that were present in the meeting to think, how can we produce this kind of data in years where census data is not available? From the first moment, we agreed to explore the use of different sources of information combined with recent methodologies, mainly small area estimation techniques. After this first idea, we introduced next steps in training needs, focusing on further use of a small area estimation methods and the use of satellite imagery, both topics previously worked in DANE. Since the integration of different sources of information requires a more advanced technological scheme than the one that we have, we decide to go in a first step with satellite imagery, and then for next or future phases to explore the integration and interoperability of more data. Up to this point, we have developed a first version of a model that captures the set of variables that replicates the results of the original MPI. All algorithms are published in a GitHub account, so are publicly available. Also, results of this first version of the model has been placed in a GeoVisor. We are also testing how these results looks like in the GeoVisor. Finally, I would like to highlight that with COVID-19 crisis, we create a portfolio of statistics available to cities and municipalities and send massive emails to local governments, putting all this data to its service, and data from MPI was one of the most demanded. Also, from entities of the national government, we received requests to merge the data from the MPI with different data sources. We were able to calculate a vulnerability index, and also we use databases of policy programs to identify vulnerable populations without aids from governments. So we believe in the use of this data to focalize aids and to better design public policy. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and maybe just again, for the folks who are tuning in the audience, if you're looking for more information on any of the material that's being presented here, I think we will be putting up a sort of just an email address that you can write to, and then we can figure out how to connect you at the end of this process to ensure, if you want to find out more about some of these initiatives, that you don't have to just try and memorize what you're hearing in a very short space of time here during a side event. So now I'm going to move over to an experience in Mongolia, in the National Statistical Office of Mongolia. And I'm going to ask, Mr. Batmunk, during the initial phase of the Data4Now project, we heard about poverty measures being critical to Colombia. In your case, it was agricultural data and crop yield estimates. Can you talk about how you work through this partnership to improve your estimates in that domain? Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant. So it's my honor to be here as a panelist. So, as you know, we have participated in the Data4Now initiative from the beginning. And in Mongolia, we are the second least densely populated country in the world. So agricultural data collection is through the traditional surveys particularly time-consuming and expensive in Mongolia. So since the impact of the climate change is increasing, the timely data on agricultural productivity and its impact on the livelihood and the migration is very essential for us. So during the initial inception workshop in Kigali, our colleagues has met with different people from the different organizations. And then during the workshop, the presenters presented about the use of the remote sensing technology to measure the crop productivity. So since after the workshop, we have started working with the Data4Now team on introducing the remote sensing technology to measure the crop yield in Mongolia. So we especially requested the World Bank through the Smart Government project to provide us the technical and the financial support in obtaining the drone and satellite imaging to measure the crop yield, and also the total area of the sown area, etc. I think in this year, starting from the June, we will be able to do the pilot test of this project and then able to get the first results. And once we are able to use these remote, the satellite imaging and drone imaging in estimating the crop yield, I think Mongolia can also, or we are planning to use it on the land use and the livestock sensors and etc. I think this will be very helpful as in getting the timely data and get the data more timely and inexpensive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So yeah, another great example of an initiative where we're joining sort of a new form of data in terms of satellite imagery to really address a question that's critical to the development of a country. Now I'm going to move to Mr. Lorenzo Marini. Again, he's a representative from the Italian government. And obviously this collaborative is very grateful to your government's support of this initiative. And we just wanted to ask you, are there some particular features of this collaborative that you found attractive? And could you speak briefly about how the ministry is supporting the work in Colombia and Senegal? So over to you, sir.
Grant, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good night to all of you, to all the participants. My approach, my presentation will be very different from the presentation that were made before myself, because my vision is the vision of the government, as you mentioned. So we are not very much into the technical details of the activities, but there is a very strong support from our part to the activities and to the project that is carried out, and we really appreciate the results that we are achieving. In general terms, Italian Development Corporation has been a long-standing supporter of capacity building in the statistics sectors, because we believe it's a key area of our multilateral and bilateral cooperation programs, including the partnership that we established with DESA, with the UN system as a whole, and on a bilateral basis with countries in specific areas. For instance, we are successfully active in this field since a long time ago, in support of the SEEDs, or the Small Island Development States, in the Asia Pacific region, in partnership with UNITAR. This is just an example, but there are many other examples that I can mention. But in general terms, the Italian Development Corporation has put the statistical capacity building as one of the priority of its activities in the biannual plan of action 2019-2021. So in that context, our support of the Data4Now initiative that was launched by the Deputy Secretary General in 2019 was a natural step. And we, because it's really consistent with our priorities, and we are really supportive of the activities that you are carrying out, are carrying out on the ground. As you mentioned, our support was to this flagship initiative was channeled specifically on 2 pilot initiatives in Senegal and Colombia. Together with Andesa and other partners, we individuated these key countries and key area for implementation based on the specific context of the 2 partners, which have a very solid cooperation with Italy and are very much needed in terms of our support in the specific field. We are very happy of the results that we achieved, and we are very satisfied, especially because we noticed that the capacity building and the production of data and estimates are very focused and very directed to some specific key topics that are also priorities for in general terms, for the Italian foreign policy and for the Italian development cooperation activities. I'm referring to poverty eradication, to food security and nutrition, to agriculture, to education, health, disaster risk resilience, and so forth and so on. But we are also very, very satisfied because there have been very innovative experience in some other fields that are not traditionally tackled by the data and capacity building activities. I'm referring specifically to the SDG 16 sector, which is a very broad sector, and more recently to the COVID-19 related issues, which are fundamental in this moment and which are a top priority for our government. Back to you, Grant.
Thank you very much. And yeah, that was a terrific intervention. I think what we're hearing so far in this panel discussion is really the eagerness of progressive statistical offices to try new approaches, to try and tap into access to new data sources and new techniques and new technology. And that requires, support from other forums. Obviously, the support from the Italian government is critical, and their enthusiasm, I think, for this initiative really translates into all of us who are trying to connect various experts with various statistical offices to ensure that we can, fill some key data gaps that are of great interest to policymakers. And then the other facet, and this is how I bring in my final panelist in this first round of question, is again Bob Chen, who's a sort of an expert in the PopGrid Data Collaborative. And the PopGrid Data Collaborative has been working in some of these countries that we've heard about today through the Data4Now initiative to improve the use of gridded population data. And I wonder if you could just share some details on the benefit of using gridded population to improve the timeliness and granularity of data. And what are your plans for PopGrid supporting this initiative as we move ahead? So over to you, Bob.
Great, thanks, Grant. And let me just take a step back because some people may not know what we mean when we call it the PopGrid Data Collaborative. I think in this panel, I'm coming primarily from the academic sector, which of course is scattered and people do all different things in the research and application fields around the world. So a few years ago, we established this collaborative to try to bring all the different groups in both academic arena, but also government research labs and agencies and stakeholders to work together and partly try to pull the new technologies and data sources and methods together and bridge the gap to what groups like national statistical offices really need. So that's actually, I think, as we all know, a pretty difficult process, and we're still working on it. And so PopGrid came up as a collaboration between the Global Partnership, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, the Gates Foundation, and a whole group of scientists from around the world to focus on these issues. And to get to your question, of course, people are at the basis of just about all the SDG indicators, and knowing where they live in order to not only generate the indicators at national or subnational levels, but also figure out who's being left behind and how to reach them is really critical. And that's where having consistent and current and accurate gridded population data becomes really important, whether you're computing, some of the indicators that were mentioned before as being important, things like slum mapping and looking at access to services and exposure to pollution or to hazards. Really knowing where people are consistently is important. And so that's where we've been trying to work both to increase familiarity, but also help countries sort out what data makes the most sense, because there's a lot of variation in how these data are generated, and some data may be more appropriate than others depending on the application. And then there are issues that come up in thinking about indicators. For example, looking at urban versus rural differences between countries is difficult because countries have traditionally defined urban and rural areas differently. But now working with the European Commission Joint Research Center, the Statistical Commission has adopted a consistent definition of urban versus rural based on these gridded population and human settlement data. So that's where I think our community can help, which is to try to help introduce these new data sources, remote sensing and big data coming from cell phone networks and so forth, but also bridge that gap to make it more consistent and useful and comparable, address important gaps like how do you measure population in slum areas, and help countries, I hope, get more familiar and able to use these data. We have run a couple training sessions about population data with Paraguay and Colombia recently, and are looking forward to doing that with other countries that may be interested. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Bob. Yeah, I'm mindful of the time, so I think I'm just, we've got about 4 minutes left in this session, and we have 4 panelists. So I think I'm just going to ask a very quick question of each of you is, what's the next step in this process from what you see? What would you like to see happen as we move ahead? From the statistical office side, is there a particular, how are you going to sustain this work? I think maybe from the Italian ministry side, what other partners would you like to see join? And then maybe from the academic side, how do you see this engagement sort of deepening? You only have a minute each, so if you could please just fire out a soundbite, that would be great, and then I'll wrap up this panel and send it on its way. So Karen, we'll start with you. We'll go through the same order as we did last time. So Karen first, please.
Okay, so we are really excited with all the work in the framework of the initiative, because we want to open the door to innovation in both sources of information and computation methods, while still are aware of quality issues for official data, including traditional and experimental statistics. And this innovation process is motivated by the challenge of having sufficiently timely and disaggregated data to help monitor the progress in the goals of the 2030 agenda, but at the end, all improvements are gains to strengthen the capacity of national statistics systems to produce any kind of data.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Batmunk, thoughts about the way ahead, brief thoughts about the way ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. So for us, it's very important to get the first results, and hopefully we will be able to get the first result during this summer. And once we get the first result, I think we will be able to move on to use these new technologies into different statistical measurements like the land use, the livestock census, etc. So we will see. So first, we have a lot of work to do. We will have to use the previous year's satellite image to estimate the crop yield and compare it with the official data, and then begin with the new estimation. So a lot of work to do now.
Great. Good to see that there's the potential for some knock-on effects for these first pilot studies that you're doing. So you can see how this is kind of benefiting a very broad set of statistics. Over to you, Mr. Marini. Any comments about the way ahead, please?
Yes, well, in terms of partners, the more the better. We think that one of the most important elements of this initiative is the peer learning process. So this is as far as we can go in terms of financial support, we will. I mean, we have no limitation in terms of partnership, in terms of members of this initiative. In terms of contents, the two elements that we think are very important are innovation, and I already mentioned it, and engagement of multi-stakeholder engagement. And this is also something that has been mentioned by many interventions. Looking ahead, dissemination, because the peer learning process is a very important element.
Thanks very much. And thanks to all of the folks who've been providing both an information exchange and some interesting thought-provoking comments in the chat box. As I said earlier, we'll be reflecting on all of this, and we'll see if we can find ways to respond after the side event. My final panelist, over to you, Bob. Any final thoughts from the role of academics in this initiative as we move ahead?
Yeah, well, just partly to repeat, I think there are many academics interested in this who would be glad to be part of partnerships. We can certainly help refer people, and not just on the population issue that I talked about. I think this is true more broadly, that there are a lot of experts around the world who would be glad to be part and could be valuable resources, I think, in this effort. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all of you out there who continued to participate through this panel. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope it gave you some ideas on how you maybe could start to create your own partnerships and work through this type of approach with us. So I'm now going to hand over the coordination to the next session in our panel, and I think it's the next to last session. And this is Ms. Francesca Perucci. She's the Assistant Director of the UN Statistics Division. And she's going to talk a little bit about the way forward for the program in general. So over to you, Francesca.
Thank you so much, Grant, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm Francesca Perucci, as Grant said, from the UN Statistics Division, and it was really good to be listening to the great work done over the almost year and a half now, since we launched the initiative. And hear both from our partners in countries and our partners from the 4 different entities that collaborated on this project. So as it was said, this initiative was launched in 2019. Our first meeting actually was in July 2019, when we met with all partners from private sector, civil society, member states, countries, and national statistical offices, international agencies, etc. And it was the time when we developed the overall vision for the Data4Now, aiming at increasing the sustainable use of robust methods and tools that improve the timeliness, coverage, and quality of SDG data. And the idea was really to create this global network of partners and provide support to countries. So the problem identified back then was that there was indeed quite a critical mass of solutions out there, but countries still were lacking the access to them and the capacity to really mainstream those solutions in their national statistical systems. So why back then, why did we come up with this idea, and why in that particular moment? The SDGs were already ongoing for well over 4 years. There was a moment when we felt there was enough political support and also a great realization that national statistical offices were already playing the role of not just data providers, but really brokering partnerships with other parts of the national statistical system, and more broadly, private sector and civil society and other entities in the countries and internationally. There was urgent demand for innovation, the realization that countries were not timely, that data, were not timely enough, and that we needed more granularity, more data, more disaggregated data. And there was urgent demand for access, for increased access to these new tools and methods that would allow countries to produce those data. And there was a strong focus on impact and return on investment in capacity building for better data, really showing results. And as I said earlier, there was already quite a lot of really proven and robust and feasible new solutions, methods, and technologies. So we started the process, and as you've seen, the countries have already done quite a lot of work, but we started with a relatively small group of countries. The focus was since the very beginning. I think you remember you were shown the photo in Kigali when all the partners came together. The focus was really talking to the chief statisticians and the national statistical offices and understanding their priorities, looking at the SDGs, looking at the targets, looking at what was missing, what were the key priorities that they wanted to address with the most urgency, right? And that was the first step. We started, we learned, we mobilized resources. You heard from the Italian government, donors became interested in supporting these initiatives. And we started brokering those partnerships with private sector, with those who can offer solutions, and connecting with the international agencies. We call them the custodian agencies, those that have set some of the basic, the structure, the framework for the methodology of the SDG indicators, and overall, for the data production in their respective domains. And this is where we are now. We are in the middle at point 2 of what you see in the slide. And it's now time to reflect and see what the way forward is, and reflect on what the overall approach is, and how we can offer this to the largest number of countries possible, in a way that really offer those solutions to all those who need them, and in a way that can be sustainable and can be integrated into the regular production of data and use of data. If we go to the next slide, thank you. So the next phase really is about continuing to work closely with the first group of 8 countries so that they continue to deliver their results and their impact, and sharing their experiences now that they are mature enough in the solutions that they are developing, and sharing their experiences on how they can really use the data and use them for improving people's lives. Ultimately, it's really about the use of this data. It's really about having data that are timely and disaggregated, as the Agenda 2030 requires. And scaling up the number of countries benefiting from these solutions, from the initiative. So the idea is really accelerating the transfer of knowledge, accelerating the transfer of the training material, all the information, to be able to share this with the largest number of countries that might share the same needs and the same priorities. And then we continue to analyze and aggregate the data gaps and needs to identify what needs to be done next, and how to match the country priorities with the solutions that are available. And then, of course, continue to monitor the impact of the project, of the different projects in the various countries, and ensure that the lessons learned can really bring continuous improvement. So how do we achieve this vision? The way we have discussed across the 4 core partners ourselves, the Statistics Division in the UN, Global Partnership, SDSN TReNDS, and the World Bank. We really see the next phase as being able to create a system where countries and partners can join in, irrespective of their level of resources that they have available. We can have countries with more resources, and perhaps they want to join only from the point of view of sharing their knowledge and sharing the solutions they have identified. And we have partners who can join. They still need resources, and we would do, of course, the necessary fundraising and mobilization, trying and help mobilizing resources so that they can join with all the resources that they need. So we really aim at delivering really real benefits for the implementation of the agenda, and in a way that can be replicated by a growing group of partners to address country priorities. Over to the next slide, Alan, thank you. So what is the approach? We start, as I said, from understanding country priorities. And so it's really up to the National Statistical Office, the National Statistical System, and we work very closely also with the UN in countries, the Resident Coordinator's Office and the country teams, where we have all the different agencies represented. We work very closely with, of course, the chief statistician, who has to assess, the list of their needs and the priorities, what they need the gaps that they need to fill most urgently, as they link to their national priorities, policy priorities in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. We identify the solutions through our network of different partners and different entities and organizations with whom we collaborate, and we, together with the countries, and those might be in the country or might be at the global level or the regional level, or a combination of all three, and it depends very much on how the country decides to proceed. And we support the brokering of those partnerships, so that those can happen and can then be implemented at the national level or the local level when needed. And then with the initiative, we provide the necessary support to develop the capacity to implement and mainstream in the data system the specific solution, so that they can be produced in a regular part of the data production of the country and used for the implementation of the SDGs. And then the next step is, of course, ensuring that whatever solution we can develop in a specific country or with a specific partner can be then replicated and can be shared with all other countries then that share the same priority and share the same need. So those solutions can be reapplied as wide as possible. And then we start again, addressing, what countries has identified their solution and that needs specifically what has been produced so far. So in approaching this next phase and scaling up and trying and offer include as many countries as possible and offer the solutions to countries around the world, we have tried to define a series of guiding principles. And those are principles that any country, any partner who wants to join, if they satisfy those principles, they can join the initiative and become part of this wider network of entities and regional, international, and national organizations that are part of the Data4Now. So first of all, of course, we have to be open and inclusive. So anyone who wants to join and is willing to satisfy these requirements, these principles, can join. The work is entirely country owned. So I won't stress enough the fact that it's really in the hands of the chief statistician, the network of different data producers in the countries. It's really based on the national priorities for the implementation of the 2030 agenda. That is how the priorities are defined, and this is how the main gaps are assessed and the main needs are assess what the initiative will address in each country. It has to have an agile impact. It has really to create value. We want to see that the data we produce are really the data that needs to be used, that are going to be used for the implementation of the agenda, are going to be used for the public to inform policies, to monitor progress, etc. It's an holistic approach where we use new solutions fully integrated into the national statistical and data system, so that can be part of the whole system to create the data that are needed for the implementation of the goals and targets. It has to be ready, production ready. It's not about piloting. It's not about spending a lot of time piloting new solutions. It's something that is ready to really create value and produce the results. It has to be sustainable, and it has to become part of the mainstreaming mainstreamed in the global the data production. It has to be transparent. So the solutions that we develop, the training material, all the information, we have to be able to transfer that knowledge easily in a transparent and accessible way to all those who want to participate. Now, and it has to be trusted. So the protocols that are implemented for this data production have to be fully compliant with data protection, confidentiality, all the principles that are upheld by a national statistical office, a national statistical system. So how do we make that happen? Of course, you need resources, and the 4 entities have so far invested their resources. Are in our division, the part of the division that works specifically on these topics, on the implementation of the SDGs, on innovation. We have invested our own resources. Our own team has worked very closely with same for all for the other 3 entities. They invested their own resources, their own time, their own knowledge. And of course, we have to create the partnership with the other partners in the private sectors, academia, civil society, who can offer their experience, their knowledge, their solutions, their training, their technology, etc. And we also ask countries who want to join, and countries and partners who can sort of twin with other countries who need more support. So if countries are ready and have already experimented and feel ready with the specific solution, they can partner with countries who need to come on board and perhaps need more support in understanding how to mainstream a certain solution into their statistical system. So these are the principles. And if we go to the next slide, the last part, of course, for a full implementation is to make sure that we share the information that we have on the value of this initiative. So we need to advocate and promote the data solutions that we have already adopted in the countries that participated in the initiative. We have to increase awareness and demand for data among policymakers, and we need to advocate for the impact of newly available data in policy decisions. And of course, fundraising. All 4 entities, the core 4 partners, are engaging in fundraising activities to allow for more countries to join in. So I'll stop here. This is what I wanted to say in terms of the way forward and where we stand with the discussion with the 4 core partners. I'm not sure we have time to take additional questions, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. But these last few minutes, I would like to give the floor to the 4th core partner of this initiative that has collaborated on this since the very beginning, and that is the World Bank, the Development Data Group. And so I'd like to pass it over to Keith Garrett. Over to you.
Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you so much.
Can you hear me?
I can hear very well. Thank you.
Okay.
Over to you.
Well, as Francesca said, I'm Keith Garrett. I'm from the World Bank's Development Data Economics VPU and our data group, where I lead the Analytics and Tools Unit. And it's my pleasure today to summarize and close the session. I'd just like to emphasize how very pleased we are to hear about all these country experiences, the progress to date, and to have had a chance to discuss these future areas for work. We've heard about these efforts in several places, whether it was strengthening statistical and cadastral systems in Senegal, or the water information systems in Paraguay and their desire to integrate satellite imagery into these systems. I was very pleased to see the experience in Colombia and their efforts to improve poverty estimation down at the municipal level, and for sharing those efforts via version control tools such as GitHub, which I had the chance to take a look at while you were speaking, and I would encourage the audience to look at that as well. Or even in Mongolia, where efforts are ongoing to use satellite imagery to remotely measure crop yields. And I think our colleague from CSUN, Bob Chen, talked a lot about integrating geospatial data and big data sources, and this is something that's very near and dear to the work of my team. So we are delighted to see all these countries' examples and the progress there. And I think one of the things that came out in the conversation that I would like to highlight is that, you know, we've heard a lot about how we have a lot of opportunity to use new data, new systems, and new technologies. But new effective data systems in the future do not just depend on new technology, new methods, new sources of data, but also governance, good standards, shared standards, and the engagement of stakeholders. And so whether this work continues into some of the identified areas, be it food security, climate change, sustainable land use, of course, COVID-19 and the rest of the SDG indicators, that comprehensive view of the work to be done is an important thing to keep in mind. I think we've heard very clearly from all the panelists about the need to support innovation and the integration of these new sources with established methods and established tools in ways that improve accuracy, but also for the need to engage multiple stakeholders in several domains, to include non-data areas of government and civil society, as well as academia. So I think everybody agrees that we're in a very transformative time for data systems. But whether we're working on strengthening an existing statistical system or working at the innovation frontier, applying new technologies and new techniques, I think we all agree that we can accomplish more when we work together and when we work in the open. So I applaud everyone here for their efforts to do that so far, and we look very much forward to continued engagement with our counterparts to make further tangible progress in these areas. Just some housekeeping announcements. When the session ends, you'll see an automatic pop-up window with a post-event survey. So please do take time to fill that out and help us learn how we can do better. If you had a question, I mean, the conversation in the chat was very lively and there was a lot of back and forth. We tried to answer your questions in the moment, but if we were not able to, and you would like to reach out to one of us or to follow up on a particular point, or you'd like a link or some other information, I encourage you to write to info@data4sdgs.org. That's info, I-N-F-O, @DATA, the number 4, SDGs.org. And with that announcement, I'd like to thank all of our contributors, all of our distinguished colleagues for sharing their insights and experience, Mr. Diop, Mr. Ojeda, Ms. Chavez, Mr. Badamonk, and our colleague Robert Chen. I'd also like to thank our D4N partners, Claire Melamed, Grant Cameron, Francesca Perucci. I'd also like to thank all the people who are working in the background, Alan, Louise, Vivek, and those others. And thank you all for a very active participation in the discussion, very fruitful work to date, and I look forward to our continued efforts going forward. And so with that, I would officially close the session and wish everyone a safe and productive day. Thank you.